Hello and welcome to the program of Women and Commercial Films. This is part of a course called Women, Media and Films in the program of Women Studies. Now, most of us, we watch films and some are heavy viewers, some would require every week to go to films, and some would not be that heavy viewer, but definitely they will be viewing films. They are called light viewers, maybe once a month. But nonetheless, we are film buffs. We go to film in general in India and we see the Bollywood films. Now, we have our own heroes, we have our own heroines, we love our stars, we love their music, we love their dance, we love their clothing, their hairstyle. So we copy them. So we are so much influenced by our stars, by our heroes, by our heroine. Many of us, we copy them, copy their way, the style of speaking, the words, the gesture, and so much so we forget our own self, that we go on copying, and this happens particularly for those who are in their teens and early 20s. Then later on our um, own self surfaces. So but overall we are very much influenced by the films, and particularly the commercial films. Now, our concern in this course is how women have been portrayed in the commercial films. If we see, we know that they are portrayed in a certain way. They are all, having good height. They have, nice, bouncy black hair. They are fair-skinned and all that. So they are portrayed in a very attractive way. They know, every one of them know how to dance. Everyone of them is, having all kinds of talents that would attract us. Now, but what sort of characters the women are depicting? In some cases, we have, they are very mild, very soft, very domesticated, and also very sexually, attractive. Some are very, different kinds. The other woman, as we have said, the other woman, not like heroine, but a vamp, but someone who is evil. That also we portray in Hindi films, in particularly in commercial films. And also towards the end in this discussion, we will see that there have been many efforts by women directors who came forward to portray women in a different way, not as commodity, but as intelligent being, having good rationale, good mind, good frame of mind, and they are very analytical in their approach. They are not domesticated. Of course, they do domestic work, but they also go out and take responsibilities. We can see that we have artists like Shabana Azmi, we have artists who are, well known, and they are not always doing the kind of program that we see others are doing. Then we have directors who contributed immensely by putting an alternative view, an alternative portrayal of the women, like Aparna Sen, like Meera Nair, like Deepa Mehta. They are the people who have portrayed women in a different way. So, since we are in it, I'm sure you have seen more films than probably I have seen, and you have some ideas as to how women are portrayed in our commercial films. So, let us go through it and consider some of the aspects of portrayal of women in commercial films in this discussion. Many times we do ask whether Hindi cinema imitate life, or is it the other way around? it has shaped and expressed the changing scenario of modern India to an extent that no preceding art form could ever achieve. So it has got tremendous influence on our society, of Indian society in general. Uh, as we know, the first women protagonist in Hindi commercial cinema was Taramati in Dadasaheb Phalke's Raja Harishchandra. That was in 1913, and it was enacted by a man since it was considered disrespectful in Indian society to play even a pious and ideal wife. So the women were not acting, the young boys were acting in the role of women. Then in Indian cinema, we have all kinds of stereotype, but in some cases, they have been elevated to a great height. But in Bollywood films, the heroines have mostly been homely, content to stay happily ever after in the institution of marriage, even if they were educated and keen to carve an identity of their own. Then this was going on for some time, and then in the 60s we have the vamps in Bollywood. And who are they? If the 60s showed the heroine as the seductress, the 70s saw the rise of the third woman. The body beater, the dancing siren, the cabaret girl, a la Helen and Aruna Irani, who were both casted as the villains arm candy or side stick. So they were considered to be arm candy or the sidekick. So this is something that we need to consider. These were in the 70s, but mostly the heroine was the submissive lover, wife who does no wrong. Now, many times we can ask question as to why people go and watch these films. To use the media effects theory in understanding how the Indian audience consume the image of the women portrayed in Bollywood films, an example that springs to mind is the way the male-centric filmmaker portrays his women lead in the film called Mora. Reality check in the 70s came up, like the film that comes to our mind is Abhiman. It begins with premise of the wife, played by Jaya Bachchan, being more talented than the husband, Amitabh Bachchan. This in itself is a defiance of the stereotype. However, the film crumbles from then because the wife gives up her thriving musical career for satisfying the husband's ego, culminating to a conventional closure. So, how cinema perceived the women? Uh, it is the male-centric Bollywood directors preserved to show women in three ways. So that director at that time in the 60s and 70s and even in 80s, they showed women either as mother all loving, open to children, always thinking about children. So that's one portrayal, the mother. Then you have the maiden, women as server, someone who serves the members of the family. And the third one is the vamp or the evil, the mistress, the other woman. And it is always shown, it has been in all our films, in poor light. Now, when we go to see the film, we have certain preconceived notion. They are weak. They are made in such a way that they cannot handle any kind of work. They are soft and cannot take on work that requires decision making, and you always doubt their ability. So, women are portrayed with certain preconceived notion that we have. Women, also shown that they are low on morals and as arm candy of the heroes. Mainstream popular romantic musical comedies like Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, Maine Pyar Kiya, or Hum Aapke Hai Kaun show women as either victim or arm candy. It is the will and discretion of the male directing the plot of the film, always. In BB number one, the husband has extra marital affairs in spite of having two kids, yet he is laboriously won over by the wife and accepted back into the family system unquestioningly. The blame of the husband's errant ways is put on Susmita Sen, the other woman, the evil, who led the poor man to astray. The man as the savior and the woman as the victim are also prominently seen in Hindi cinema discourse. The heroine is a damsel in distress who has to be rescued by the hero if she is in trouble. Now, these are the different portrayal of women that we have seen. But there is a trend, there is a trait. It went on for about 30, 40 years that women are weak, they are to be domesticated, they are sexual object, and they are so weak that they continuously to be protected by father, by brother, and by the husband. And they are incapable of taking up any responsibility which would require decision making, which would require them to apply their mind. And this continued for such a long time. But there is a change. And let us see what are the changes that were brought in quite late, but nonetheless they were brought in. In Queen, Kangana Raut gives an altogether new definition of happiness when she impinges on her lonesome journey to her dream city London for her honeymoon. Queen uh, Queen overcomes her resentment for patriarchy with an analytical understanding of life and first-hand empirical experience of psychology of the oppressor and the ways of the world. So she is able to analyze whatever was happening to her. Then we see another new wave commercial film like Priyanka Chopra in Mary Kom, that was in 2014, makes a brilliant impact in his women-centered film. What is noteworthy is the fact that there is no prominent male protagonist. And this was directed by Umang Kumar. The film is surprisingly devoid of male biases. Contemporary Indian cinema has come a long way and charted out an appreciable journey to the total emancipation of women from the shackles of male dominated society. Now, so there was a little change. If we see Mary Kom, of course, Mary Kom leaves, but main theme was taken from her life and was made into a film, and Priyanka Chopra gave a brilliant, performance in that. And we also have uh, different characters, different artists who would shun away from the stereotyping roles, and they would be, projecting an image that would be, quite confident, would be different, different than other women, and would have their own mind, and they would apply that mind. Shabana Azmi is one who has been regularly portraying that kind of character. Then we have Vidya Varan, who recently has portrayed a lot of characters that would bring a new, fresh perspective to the portrayal of women in Bollywood film. And I'm sure many of you might have seen those films. Kahani you must have seen, and many of you must have appreciated that it got a very good press, and international acclaim also. Now, let us come towards the end now of the discussion. Um, this discussion, this discourse will not be complete when we are talking about women. We need to talk about the directors who came forward and gave a different perspective about women. They portrayed women in a different way they wanted, and not the way the male directors wanted. One of them is Aparna Sen. Aparna Sen's stature as a film actress was so big that she had to come to direction sooner or later, and it had to be a different film. Thankfully, she didn't disappoint her fans. 36 Chaurangi Lane, that was in 1981, marked her foray into direction. It was subtle, emotionally charged, and heavy in its outcome. The film was made in English, but it connected with everyone and gave a new dimension to the idea of English filmmaking in India. Then we have Meera Nair and Deepa Mehta. They are leaving their impression on the world cinema map, while Kalpana Lajmi and Vijaya Mehta, then you have Mani Ratnam and Tanuja Chandra, they have also done their bit to pave the way for more women filmmakers in our commercial film. It's not that their films are commercially not successful. They are commercially successful. At the same time, what they have done is to bring in a new dimension to the portrayal of women. So now to conclude, let me summarize or go over the issues that we have talked of. Commercial film, of course, is an industry, therefore it has to make money in order to survive. But it has been doing it since the beginning of the film industry here in India, that is at the beginning of the last century. Women have been portrayed mostly as weak, as fair-skinned, as someone who should stay at home, domesticated, would not do any work that would require analytical mind, and would not take up any responsibility, any social responsibility other than the responsibility of the family. And that too, decisions would be with the men folk only. Then we had the women being portrayed as vamp, as evil, and that was in 60s and in 70s. We have characters like Shabana Azmi and Vidya Balan who were shunning away from the stereotyping portrayal of women, and they brought in fresh air and portrayed women who would have the gravity, they would have their own mind, they would be able to take their own decision and lead life that would impress the others, or would portray not the stereotyping but the other women. And towards the end, we have discussed about the different directors, women directors, who again portrayed women in a different way. They are, Aparna Sen, Meera Nair, Deepa Mehta. They are making films, and their films are successful. Also, they make us think about women and their role in our society. So I'm sure when you go and see films in the theater or in television, you will keep this in mind and watch how the women are being portrayed in those episodes or in those films. Thank you for watching, and I am sure you will have an analytical mind next time when you watch a film.